Rude. All right. Giving everybody a couple minutes to get in, and then we'll get going. All right. We are going to get going now. And I'd like to welcome everybody into Horsehead Weekly, the draft recap show. Now, for those of you who don't know, who haven't seen these before, don't remember from last year, the draft recap show is not my first power rankings. That is not what they are. They are not. This is just where I look at the draft, look at how everyone did, look at how everything worked out, and then basically say, hey, this is my feelings on the draft. I'm not going to go in super depth on any particular teams except for my good, bad, and ugly. And that's basically it. Everybody else, you can wait and see how you end up stacking up. I will talk about every team. I am going to talk about different ways that people drafted, how they end up working out for them, stuff like that. But it's not going to be as in depth as the power rankings, and it's not going to have any other things going on where I'm like, oh yeah, check out all this other really cool stuff that's going on. It's just going to be, hey, this is the draft. So let's take a look at it, and I'm just going to leave this up here while I talk for most of the time because yeah, this is basically it. This is the important bits here. So, just to start off, the Christian McCaffrey going before Saquon is very interesting. Did not expect that to happen. Also, did not expect Hopkins to go before Zeke. I know there were a lot of people at the draft who were talking about Zeke and how they think he's going to fall. He might even make it to the second round because a lot of people were worried about him because he hasn't signed yet and everything like that. He isn't showing up to camp or anything. So people were just kind of like, oh, well, what's going to happen with him? And then James ends up taking him, which was surprising because Devontae Adams was on the board. But then Doug takes James Conner over Devontae Adams. And then Nick Chubb goes off the board. And then Le'Veon goes off the board. And I'm just sitting there, I'm taking Devontae Adams there. I mean, I like him. I think he's a really good guy. And then Julio, Michael Thomas, David Johnson, pretty typical end of the first round. Those are all first round people that should be taken in the first round. A lot of people have David Johnson a lot higher, but clearly I had Devontae Adams ahead of him, so I took. Um, but yeah, so the first round, while the names were scrambled up a little bit, nothing too crazy happened. Um, Into the second round, though, Malcolm taking Todd Gurley was a little bit surprising. Not a lot of people have him that high. And then continuing on, Patty Mahomes going in the second round. I mean, I've been drafting from the 9 spot in a lot of mocks and stuff like that, and I've been taking Mahomes at uh, in round 3, sometimes even round 4. If I decide to pass on him, he might make his way back. So that seems a little bit early, but I mean, honestly, if you believe in him, you think, yeah, he might take a step back, but he's not taking a huge step back. He is definitely one of the top 2 to 3 quarterbacks this year. And you just want to lock that down because, having extra points at quarterback, it is the highest scoring position per player. It's definitely something that you want to do, and, Tyler ended up locking that up for himself. And then coming back around the other side, we have Ertz and Kittle going a lot earlier than I'm used to seeing them as well. I was hoping to float one of those on down to my spot. And then just a lot of really solid picks at this point. Damian Williams, Kerryon Johnson, Leonard Fournette, Aaron Jones. And then I think finishing off that tier with Mack, Carson, and Gordon at the time. That just looked really beautiful. That was just a really nice run of running backs, and I think they all that was just a great time to be picking a running back because we had that good tier there. This was before Marlon Mack fell out of that tier because we did not yet know that was taken. And then from then on, that's just the first 3 rounds, kind of giving you just like a little bit of a feel as to how things were going. But now I want to talk more about how the teams were built. And I'm going to go team by team, starting with the first pick, moving on through. And I'm basically going to say, how was your team built? How do I like it? Who don't I like? And stuff like that. And then I'm going to go in on a few teams after this. So let's start off with Mike. A lot of people are afraid of Christian McCaffrey this year, and that is why he wasn't the consensus number 1 that Saquon was. They think, well, he got a lot of work, and I mean, we're talking like he was on the field every down. Yes, these top end running backs, we're expecting them to get 250, 300 touches. We're expecting them to get these monster yardage numbers and touch numbers, but we're not really that concerned with that because they are these, more built guys. Where Christian McCaffrey, he's not that same wrecking ball or the big guy style of running. So worrying about him breaking down, worrying about the passing offense getting better in a lot of other places, with people like Curtis Samuel coming on and DJ Moore coming on, a lot of people are thinking, well, those are touches that are going to come away from McCaffrey because if you can take shots downfield, that's just going to be better. So McCaffrey going number 1 overall, I mean, I'm not going to hate on it too much. I just did. Whatever. But I think it's still something to consider that, yeah, not the best number 1 overall pick. It is still one of those top 4 guys. I don't think you can really go wrong. And with Zeke holding out, as long as you took one of McCaffrey, Barkley, and Kamara in the first 3 picks, you were doing fine. And, so I think Mike did fine taking Christian McCaffrey. He then goes into Keenan Allen and Zach Ertz. So basically, it looked like what he was doing in the top 3 picks. Really smart. Get a stud running back in the first round. Get one of those high-end, probably going to finish as a wide receiver 1, really good pedigree and everything like that in Keenan Allen because he's always been good. And then take the best tight end on the board. Build this team that is going to have a mismatch at the top 3 positions. You're going to have a better RB than most people, a better wide receiver than most people at wide receiver 1, and a better tight end. Now, when you look down the board a little bit, typically you're going to find there's an issue with that. You're taking the tight end, so you're running back 2, your wide receiver is going to fall off. You can't get one of those top end quarterbacks and stuff like that. But I think he did a pretty respectable job building his team. When the draft came back to him, because he was sitting on the corner, not always the best, he had to sit there and watch as, Galladay, Michelle, Henry, and Lindsey all went off the board in front of him. Now, I personally think Galladay was the best of those picks. The other three not so great. But then he ends up getting Mark Ingram, who is going to be the running back in Baltimore, which I don't know if that's a great thing to be, considering the track record of the running back in Baltimore the last few years. They've all been usurped. Hasn't really gone well for them. But I think this is a different story because it's somebody who has shown that they are able to carry a big workload. They're able to be very productive. And I think that's why Mark Ingram is going to end up not going the way of, I can't even remember their names. Was it like Buck Allen at one point was supposed to be the guy in Baltimore? That's not how it's going to go anymore. And when you have somebody who is as talented as Lamar Jackson out there, somebody who's not afraid to throw the ball downfield, not afraid to use his legs, um, somebody who's that a rare athletic, pure athletic talent, he is going to be able to have a lot more space out there. And I think that makes him a great investment at the end of the fourth round as a running back too, because he could very well develop if they are spending all their, you can put 8 people in the box, but if 2 of them are contained and one of them is a spy, well then there's only really 5 people coming at a running back run or a draw or something like that. I think they can make it a very interesting offense, and I think they can really make Mark Ingram tick. So I think that's a very good pick. And then, so you got 2 really good running backs, your wide receiver and your tight end, and then somehow you get Baker Mayfield in the 7th round, who is somebody that a lot of people love right now. A ton of people um, are just in love with this guy. They think that he's going to be absolutely spectacular, and why wouldn't you think that? Between all the targets that he has, the offense being looking as good as it is, I mean, he just has to throw the. You could close your eyes, throw the ball downfield, and somebody's going to come up with it. And you have a really pretty good offensive line, I think, at this point. Malcolm can tell me if I'm wrong on that one, but I think this is going to be, a really good team this year. And I know that I'm not going on a limb saying that, but I think it's going to be a pretty good team. And having the quarterback for it is really great. Then you're filling in at other positions with, you know, Darius Leonard, the number 1 linebacker last year. You took him as the first defensive player off the board. Landon Collins, somebody who is perennially in the top 2 or 3 DBs. Cameron Jordan, who is looking like he's going to be a beast again this year. I mean, you got these great defensive players, great players at every single position who have plus matchups against anyone you play against, and Godwin, Robinson, Sutton, Crowder. These are all people who could break out. Godwin saying he's a 1B to the 1A of Mike Evans, so they're not a 1 and 2 anymore. You have Allen Robinson, who, if he can get back to when he was great, he could be a great find in the 6th round. And then Jamison Crowder, who I believe is their slot guy out in for the Jets. I don't know if you've heard of this guy who was apparently pretty good for the Dolphins, Jarvis Landry, back when they had Adam Gase and his crazy eyes and smelling salts and all of that. So I think this is a very, very solid team, and I'm realizing I'm rambling way too much on each individual team. I'm going to try to shorten up a little bit. Basically, Mike, I think you have a very great team. It's definitely a top 4 team in the league. I don't really think you really punted on any picks too early on. I mean, Allen Robinson might be a little bit dicey, but then again, there wasn't really anyone else you could take in the 6th round unless you wanted to go on a limb on a Josh Gordon or AJ Green, and really wanted to try to be like, okay, cool, when these guys get up to speed and they're doing well, blah, blah, blah. And then Kalen Balaj, I think, was a complete just botch of a pick at number 8. You needed another running back to really solidify your top 3 backs for when you have buys or in case somebody gets hurt. And I don't think Kalen Balaj is going to be the guy. I think it's going to be very big on the Kenyon Drake show this year. But then again, I have thought that for many years now, and that hasn't happened. So anyways, moving on from Mike, let's move on to Tyler. Now, Tyler jumped in with actual minutes to prepare, not really knowing what was going to happen, if this was going to be his draft. Is this him? Is this going to be his team? Is this not going to be his team? But with Steve's abrupt departure from the league. Steve Studs ended up going to Tyler, and he swept in and picked up Saquon, which I think was just a great pick there. Patty Mahomes in the second round, as I said when I was doing my round by round earlier, not great pick at round 2. I mean, honestly, I think he could have waited for round 3. I don't think Mike was going to take him. But if you want your guy and you love your guy, sometimes you just have to go after him. I think the second round is a very high price to pay, but again, he's on the corner. Didn't really have an option if you wanted him to come back. He had to take him there, and that's what he ended up doing. Thielen is another interesting pick. I understand that um, he has a very good rapport out there. He's a very good player, but I feel like him and Diggs, I don't know if he's going to be able to put up with with the talent around him and everything like that. Another 9 games of 100 yards from scrimmage, all those touchdowns he had last year. I just don't think he has it in him to make that happen this year. So I think the third round might be a little bit high of a price. But again, he's on the corner. He already had a running back and a quarterback, and if he wanted a top end wide receiver, like look what would have happened if he didn't take Thielen there. Let's say he takes Damian Williams. The next best guy he would have got back is maybe Chris Godwin. He would have been taking in the fourth. So I think he had to take a wide receiver there if he wanted to make sure he had one. And I think Adam Thielen was the best one on the board, both before and after the Andrew Luck retirement. So yeah, I think that was a smart pick on his part, even if I think it was overreaching by, maybe half a round or so. And then on the way back, he ends up taking Philip Lindsay. Now I like Mark Ingram more than Philip Lindsay, but I mean, if the guy can replicate what he did last year, a fourth round value for Tyler there is going to be an absolute steal for Lindsay. And then Mike Williams and Jarvis Landry being the next 2 picks for him. I mean, he's the LA guy. He wanted Mike Williams. Maybe he knows something I don't. He tends to know a lot of things I don't when it comes to fantasy football because he is a very good player. So I'm just going to let that one ride, let his biases and his knowledge work out there for him. Who knows what they're going to be doing out there if they don't get Gordon to sign, if he sits out the first 9 weeks or whatever he can do before he actually loses everything. I think maybe that'll be a really good pick. Who knows? Then coming back on the next turn, he ends up taking Jarvis Landry, who is a pretty good guy there. I probably would have taken him over anybody else on the board. Maybe D.D. Westbrook would have been like a contrarian pick or something like that, just to look cool. But I don't know if that's what I would end up doing. I would think I would have ended up just going with Jarvis Landry, even though I hate him. If you wanted a wide receiver there, and I think starting off with Saquon, you want to have a couple, bullets in the chamber for that wide receiver 2 spot, because your wide receiver 1 is locked up, and you already have Lindsay as your 2. So I think that was a good decision on his part. And then coming back around, the only position he didn't have locked up yet was tight end. And I think Hunter Henry was an absolutely fantastic pick here. It's one of my favorite picks because it's the end of that big 6. A lot of people talk about the big 3 of Kelce, Ertz, and Kittle. I think you can add Howard, Ingram, and Henry to a lesser degree to that grouping, and you're going to get just some really good players there. I think they're all going to be fantastic. I think Cook is probably the next one, which is Malcolm's Vance McDonald pick. I don't know what that was about. I don't think that was a good one at all, but I'll get to that later. So I think, and then he builds out his team from there, adding David Njoku as a backup in case Hunter Henry doesn't end up doing that great. I mean, he is coming off an injury after all. Marvin Jones is a great value pick. Adrian Peterson, somebody who, if the wheels end up falling off for Lindsay and he ends up not being good, he just somebody you can just plug in for the first few weeks before his age sets in. So yeah, I think that was a pretty solid draft from Tyler. It's definitely my top half. Next up, we have Junior Blow And this is this is this is a good team. I like this team a lot. I mean, Alvin Kamara. So you got the last of hi, hello, my dog's coming over to say hi. You get the last of those big three running backs coming back on through. You end up taking Freeman, who now that he doesn't have anybody else in the backfield to really worry about, he's able to just go absolutely crazy. And maybe he can return to that form where he had that number one, because he was the number one running back in the league a couple years ago. George Kittle last year, he was one of the last picks in the draft. This year, third round, well deserved. Especially if you're Dante Pettis and Goodwin. If they don't really develop as everyone's expecting, and he just ends up being the guy who just kind of hanging out there. I think he'll be absolutely fantastic out there. Now, I'm not a huge Derrick Henry fan, but if that's what you're going to give me, that's what I'm going to take. I mean, again, I think Mark Ingram or Philip Lindsay would have been a better pick there, coming back in the fourth round, but that's what he ended up going with. And then, Tyler Boyd and Alshon Jeffrey are both technically, um, Boyd is technically wide receiver 2, but he's a 1 right now with AJ Green going on, and Alshon is the wide receiver 1 out in Philly, and I think they're both, have a lot of talent on them. But then he kind of goes south a little bit with Freeman and Kirk. I just really don't know what to think of those guys. I mean, Freeman I think could be good if he takes the job. I don't know. And then he gets into the stuff that I really really like, which is he takes Keanu Neal, Tyrell Williams, and Lamar Jackson in that round 10 plus range. If I didn't get one of my big four quarterbacks, one of my favorite things to do was to basically say, is it Cam or am I getting Lamar Jackson? Because I think those two have a ton of upside this year. They're both looking to be great. And I think with Lamar Jackson out there, especially with his schedule being as easy as it is to start the season, this could make him get out to an absolutely fantastic start. Tyrell Williams, in the event that Antonio Brown hangs him up, is going to be the number one guy out there. And I think he's shown in his time in LA that he can definitely do something with that. And then Keanu Neal is one of those top end DBs who can potentially bust through that. It's not worth really doing anything with the DB and end up being really, really good this year. So let's move on to Nick. Well, Nick has a couple issues with his team. First off, he picked Lamar Miller in the 6th round. That's what you get for drafting at a Mets game. You don't know that Lamar Miller is actually out for the season, so that's kind of rough for you. I really don't like Sony Michel this year. I think that backfield's going to be an absolute mess, like it always is. So I'm not really sure how that's going to go. But your wide receiver core really cannot be argued with. DeAndre Hopkins, Tyreek Hill, and Cooper Kupp. Hopkins easily can be the wide receiver 1 this year. Tyreek Hill, if he keeps his nose out of trouble, which is tough, you don't have any moral issues with it. He could be absolutely fantastic in the 2nd round. And then Cooper Kupp, you roll the dice every week as to is he going to hit that 1 in 3 chance that he's not going to do anything that good because there's not enough touches to go around out in LA. But I think it's going to be absolutely great. And then, you have Geis out there who's just waiting for Peterson to fall over so he can take over and stuff like that. Russell Wilson, I think, is he's just been so efficient lately, and if they end up having to throw the ball more this year because they're behind because their defense is worse, as it continues to age, it continues to leave that Legion of Boom. I think he can end up having a really good quarterback there. And as I said, Jared Cook is that 7th tight end, and to get him in the 8th round as kind of like, as you can see, the end of that top tier as you go 4 more rounds, 5 more rounds before you hit another guy. I think he did a very good job drafting his team. Not entirely sure who Devin Bush is, but hey, you're a homer, and if the 11th round is when you have to go to take your homer guy, then that's what you got to do. Moving on to James. James did the thing that somebody was going to eventually do, take Zeke. Best of luck to you, James. I know I'm personally rooting for Zeke to come back just because he's a lot of fun to watch. And then you also have Dalvin Cook and T.Y. Hilton making the first 3 picks of your draft. A guy who is currently holding out, a guy who has missed more NFL time than he has played over the first 2 seasons of his career, and a guy whose quarterback just retired. That is spooky. I don't know what to do with your team. I really don't. I'm going to say it's not good right now, but if Cook plays all his time, the brisket's as tasty as Tyler makes, and Cook ends up staying healthy, I mean, those 3 are going to be absolutely phenomenal picks to start the draft. Um, I don't know who your tight end is. I'm assuming it's just some random dude you're going to stream off of, so that's cool. Um, but you don't have to worry a ton about T.Y. Hilton if he ends up flopping and going and reverting back to how bad he was before. You get T.Y. Hilton flopping. All right, Kenny Galladay, Calvin Ridley, D.D. Westbrook, and Geronimo Allison. You're gonna find 2 starters out of there. You're gonna find probably a wide receiver 1 out of there. Whether it's Calvin Ridley, really coming into his own this year under the tutelage of Julio, if it's Kenny Galladay having the breakout season we've been hoping he'll have, D.D. Westbrook with Nick Foles suddenly, he's got the big dick energy running around with his DD out, and he's just going to do great things. Or Geronimo Allison, really being the second guy for Aaron Rodgers. I think this could be a really, really great season for that. Um, yeah, I think you have a lot of really good players. Now, on the other side of it, you are starting Jared Goff as your quarterback, which isn't great, but he did have a good run last year for a while, so he could be definitely worth starting every single week. And then you have things like Justice Hill, Tony Pollard, and Ito Smith, who are all people sitting behind somebody at the moment, hoping that somebody gets hurt. Maybe you can try to sell handcuffs. I don't really know what you're trying to do with that one, James. And then for the rest of your running back depth, you have Kenyon Drake as the only real option at the moment if Zeke holds out week 1, that you can start. And then, that's going to be a little bit rough, but I'm sure you can make it work. Moving on to Doug. Doug shocked the world when he took James Conner instead of Devontae Adams. Not because I like Conner more or less than Devontae Adams, but because he's a Green Bay fan, he didn't go that route. Absolutely a shocker. But James Conner is still a good player, and even though I don't have him that high up in the draft, he's still a first-round pick. He's still pretty decent, so I like him there. If that's a guy that you're really high on, that's how it's going to go. That whole tier of running backs with your Connor Chubb, Bell, Johnson, Mixon, Gurley, some people have Cook up there as well. If that's how you got to do it, that's how you want to do it, Doug. He ended up taking Travis Kelce in the second round, a guy who I strongly considered taking over OBJ, but I ended up deciding against it. I just thought that the value was too high with OBJ there. Now, if OBJ wasn't there, and it was Le'Veon Bell was there instead, oh yeah, I would have been all over Kelce. But that's just how I ended up going. And then he ends up taking Kerryon Johnson, which is, in my opinion, one of the last great picks that he made. Because it seems like from here on out, maybe not last great picks, but it seems like he goes like every other pick is a really good pick. So he goes Kerryon Johnson, great pick in the third round, no less. A lot of people are saying, "Oh, I'm a little afraid to take him in the second round where his ADP is." Well, you got him in the middle of the third round. That's an absolute steal. I think you did an absolutely fantastic job there. Not based on the talent around him. Like, Williams and Fournette are the 2 guys bracketing him. I think he's in the same range as those guys. I just think it's really, I think you just got a really great value there, regardless. And then you take Julian Edelman, who, if Brady takes a step back, Edelman gets hurt again. He is over 30 years old. He is a slot guy making a lot of big cuts. He is running over the middle a lot, so he's going to get blasted. I'm not entirely sure how this is going to end up working out for Edelman, but my personal hope is that he isn't getting completely obliterated into pancake dust. Um, I don't know what Pancake Dust is. Moving on. Then he did a great pick with Aaron Rodgers in the 5th round to get a potential number 1 quarterback. I think he did a really good job with that. So, great job doing that. I personally would have taken Deshaun Watson over him. Um, and as the guy who was 3 picks later, really hoping for Watson or Rodgers to show up, man, that did not sit well with me. But hey, yeah, I think he did a pretty good pick there. And then he takes DJ Moore. I think a 6th round pick for him is a little bit too much, but you gotta take what you gotta take. He wanted another wide receiver there, I'm assuming, and probably didn't like Jeffrey, Landry, or Robinson, so can't super blame the guy. Then back to another great pick in the 7th round. It seems like whenever the picks were going towards me, he takes a guy I really like, and going away from me, he takes somebody I don't like. He takes Tariq Cohen. I think Tariq Cohen, absolutely fantastic player. I think he's going to get a lot more touches in Chicago than a lot of people think he's going to get, at least early on in the season, and I think maybe even later on. I don't know how much Montgomery's going to be able to take away from Cohen, as Cohen is the type of guy who's established himself for a while now as the running or the receiving guy. And then Larry Fitzgerald, look, he's a legend. I'm not sold on that offense. I'm not sold on the way this is going to work out. I'm not taking him in the 8th round. So that's Doug, basically. And then he goes on, this run of defensive players and stuff like that, which is fine. I don't know. I'm just off of it at that point. I don't want to talk about people that picked that late. Sean, now welcome to the league, Sean. This is your first time drafting with us, and just so you know, taking somebody who is best player available is fine to do, but when you do it to this degree, where it is literally who's the top guy on my draft board, don't care I have Deshaun Watson, I'm taking Carson Wentz. Don't care that I already have 3 linebackers and can only start 1, I'm taking a 4th. Dude, you're absolutely bonkers and crazy, and I love it. Welcome to the league. This is going to be a lot of fun. Other than that, I think you did a pretty fine job of drafting talent. Nick Chubb at 7, early but fair. Antonio Brown, if you're not worried about his feet, might be a steal at that point in the draft. Leonard Fournette, or I guess you should worry about his brain and his helmet and all the other issues with Antonio Brown. I think Fournette, at that point in the 3rd, I was really hoping for one of Johnson, Fournette, or Jones to make it to me, because I like those guys a little bit more in that tier. You end up taking Fournette, which ended up working out really well. Hey, can you guys not do that right now? Tyler Lockett is somebody that a lot of people are very high on. Deshaun Watson absolutely broke my heart when you took him. Evan Ingram, again, getting one of those big tight ends I talked about. But then, I don't know what you were doing. You end up taking a 2nd quarterback, Emmanuel Sanders, who, while healthy, I don't think you need to pay that high of a price on him. Alexander Madison is good if you're the Cook owner, but you're not the Cook owner. So I'm not entirely sure what you're doing with that. Then you got James Washington, who is a guy who consistently balls out in the preseason and then doesn't actually do anything. Myles Garrett's a good pick, but then you just kind of go on this run of linebackers. I don't know, dude. You're fine. Like, welcome to the league. I want to see how you end up righting this ship. And then the guy who picked right before me half the time, Matt S. And thank you for taking Le'Veon Bell. Made my life so much easier. I thought you were gonna take Adams for sure, and then I was gonna have to take Julio. And then you ended up taking Le'Veon, and I was like, great. Devontae Adams is my number 6 player. I have him right after the big 4 running backs and Hopkins, so I was super happy to get him at 9. So thank you for doing that. I think Le'Veon Bell is going to be horrible. As somebody who has watched Kenyon Drake absolutely languish away, and they're also saying that Ty Montgomery is going to end up taking a bunch of touches away from Le'Veon. Man, that's going to be an absolute garbage fire out in the Meadowlands. But anyways, moving on. Then we have Mike Evans. I think is a pretty good pick if you are a fan of Tampa Bay. If you think that they're going to be a good team this year, they're going to put up a lot of points, and They have to because their defense hasn't really improved at all. Um, so I think that Mike Evans is going to end up being a pretty good pick there. Again, Aaron Jones, I said before, I think he's really good. You took Robert Woods right after I took Brandon Cooks. I basically have them as the same human, so I think you did pretty good there with that. Um, Tevin Coleman is a bit scary for me. I'm not a huge fan of him um, this year. I think that that's going to be a lot bigger of a timeshare. So taking Matt Breida later, like I did, or taking McKinnon later, like somebody else did. I think it was Nick took him. I think that's a much better way to do it. Um, I think that's a much better way to do it. Take the guys who go later, because I think it is going to be a timeshare ultimately, and you don't want to end up being the guy taking the guy who's first in a timeshare. I say as the guy who took Brandon Cooks first, who is in a receiving timeshare with Woods and Cooper Cup. Can I help you, Ivy? Yeah, you guys just playing good. Yeah. Okay. Um, Latavius Murray, though, you redeem yourself there. I think Latavius Murray is very, very good. If I didn't super commit on the 5-6 turn to going 0 RB, I could have passed up on Matt Ryan, hoping to get Cam back, and then end up going with Latavius and, getting the guy who is going to take over for Mark Ingram's role, which last year we were taking him in a much higher round than the 6th. So I think that's pretty good. And then, Fuller, Scantling, Jackson, Pettis, taking a bunch of shots. And then to get Drew Brees all the way down at round number 11, if he has anything left in the tank, you're going to be super duper rewarded at that pick. And then peeking out there at the bottom, you have Darwin Thompson, who, again, I think is going to be very, very good this year. If they end up taking any kind of workload off of Damian Williams, it's going to go straight to him. He can be their passing downs guy. He can be a lot of different stuff. So I think that'd be pretty. I think that's going to be a pretty solid pick there. We get to my team. I never made a mistake. Every single pick I made was perfect. You guys basically look like amateurs out there with me. I'm just kidding. I want to go through it the same way. I basically committed to 0 RB pretty early on with Adams and Beckham, but then with that value sitting there with Marlon Mack before the Luck retirement, I couldn't pass up on it. I thought he was a mid-third round grade, maybe early mid-third round grade, but to go this late, I really had to jump on it. I couldn't pass up on that, and I guess I could have went for Amari Cooper or Stephon Diggs if I really wanted to commit to 0 RB, but the value was just there at running back. I didn't want to pass it up, so I ended up going after my running back 1, which I would later on regret. And then when it came back to me, I had my pick of Galladay, Lockett, Woods, and Cooks. I just kind of just went with Cooks. I don't really know why. I thought it was a little bit early for Galladay. I could have went with Lockett as the guy who is going to be the guy in Seattle this year instead of a guy splitting time in LA. But, we'll see how that ends up going. I really wanted to get Amari Cooper there, but Jerry did a great job to take him there on me, which he ended up doing the next time it came back to him. But we'll get to that in a second. Then in the 5th round coming back to me, I saw that no one after me had a tight end. I needed a tight end. I didn't want to miss out on my opportunity to take one of those top guys that I've been talking about, those big 6, and then Jared Cook sitting at 7. I didn't want to wait to Jared Cook. I wanted one of those top 6 guys. So I ended up going with O.J. Howard there, just in case there was a bit of a run that started. And I got my favorite guy of that group because I am one of those people who believe there's going to be a lot of targets in Tampa Bay, a lot of touchdowns, and O.J. Howard is an absolute freak who is still learning the game, and I want to see what he can turn into. At that point, I basically was waiting for my pick to come back, and I watched Eckler, Gordon, Green, and White all go away from me. All people I would have loved to have. So with all of them being gone, I ended up deciding to go with Matt Ryan and just double down on the 0 RB. Now, I probably should have taken Latavius or Kenyon Drake there. or even let O.J. Howard go earlier and taking one of those guys. But I think I did a fine pick with Matt Ryan because I think he does have that ability to be one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL this year because he is so good. Can you just what does Ivy have? Oh, she's just chewing on her foot. Okay. Um, but yeah, and then oh, and then I kind of went off the rails a little bit, just trying to take any running back I could. I took Darrell Henderson in the seventh round, and I'm just gonna hope that Gurley is healthy because again, I want everyone to be healthy and happy. But maybe he decides to be a cattle farmer and move off to a ranch somewhere and stop playing football. In which case, I think Darrell Henderson's going to be a great person to have. Um, and despite what Malcolm and Jerry say, neither of them really like him at all. So I guess I could have let him go and taken Duke there at number 7, but hey, them's the breaks. And then I ended up getting Breida back. Again, that whole idea that I talked about earlier with Tevin Coleman. Curtis Samuel, I didn't want to take another wide receiver for the rest of the draft if I could have gotten away with it. But why are you guys? You guys are being menaces right now. But I couldn't really help myself. Curtis Samuel in the ninth round is absolutely stupid value. So I took him there, and then I kind of went on a run with Dion Lewis, LaShawn McCoy, and Buddy Howell. Buddy Howell is a guy I literally Googled before picking him, and he was like, he's a guy on the Texans. He might take some work. And I was like, all right, cool. If he ends up winning the job, and Duke is like the third down guy, the passing downs guy, sure, maybe that could be a really sneaky good pick. Shady is going to end up getting a lot of touches early on in the season, and Dion Lewis is a pretty decent pick too. So I feel like I might have went a little crazy with some of my picks, where I could have taken some people who were a lot better. But I don't know. I feel like I did fine where I did my picking. Jerry then comes in at number 10. We're almost there. Maybe this isn't going to end up being an hour like most of my other shows. Julio Jones at number 1, Juju at number 2, also starting 0 RB, but he also saw great value coming as I believe he is pretty high on Seattle as a whole. So he ends up taking Chris Carson, Amari Cooper, not worried about the plantar fasciitis, which I have had, and I will tell you it is absolutely horrible, but he doesn't seem to be worried about it. Neither does Cooper. Neither does anybody else. So, hey, getting him in the fourth round, absolutely great pick there. I would have loved to have him instead of taking Brandon Cooks, but hey, them's the breaks for me. He ends up taking Miles Sanders, getting the guy who people presume will be the guy in Philadelphia. And if that offense is as good as it has been, I think Sanders could just be absolutely fantastic as a fifth-round value. But as a rookie, of course, his value is going to be suppressed. He then takes James White right before me. I know this is a half PPR league. I needed a running back. He ends up taking a guy I would have loved to have right before me. So I go, all right, cool, move on with my life. He takes Cam in the 7th, which I think is absolutely fantastic. I think Cam is going to be very, very good this year. He might be one of those guys who's going to be challenging for a top 5. He's going to be, I have Mahomes, Watson, Rodgers, Ryan, Newton as my top 5. I have Lamar Jackson dangling just underneath those guys somewhere. So yeah, I think Cam Newton's going to end up being really, really good this year. He's got a lot of weapons developing. He's got Christian McCaffrey still to pad his stats. And if he ends up being healthy this year, not having a sore shoulder or feet or whatever ends up bothering him, if he can have an absolutely healthy season, he can be back to his MVP form, in that first season form that he had where he was absolutely dominant in every facet of the game. And then you have Rashad Penny, again, the handcuff to Chris Carson, just locking that up. Absolutely great. Didn't bother me none. And then he sees the defensive players starting to go with Leonard and Wagner. He decides to lock up what everyone is saying is going to be the number 1 DB this year. Absolutely this great decision on his part. And then when it comes back around to him, he sees Aaron Donald go right before him. He knows that if he wants J.J. Watt, he has to get him right then and there. And that's what he does. He ends up locking up J.J. Watt, who could end up being one of the best defensive linemen in the league, or not. Because who knows? Defensive lineman's pretty weird. And then he ends up going in the 11-12 turn. I took LaShawn McCoy, So he then had the option of taking Jones and Parker. If I would have considered taking Devin Singletary on the way back, but I got that stolen from me. I didn't mention that earlier. But yeah, I think that's a pretty good job. He locks up two very potent backfields with Seattle and Tampa Bay, and he also has the passing downs guy in New England and Miles Sanders, the rookie out of Philly. I don't think he's going to have an issue going with those guys, even after starting off with three of his first four picks being wide receivers. And I also love his quarterback, Eric Ebron. Who knows what that's going to be? He could be the safety blanket. He could end up being garbage, but he got that pick so late. Who really cares? Um, Moving on to the final two teams, we have Malcolm. Malcolm didn't decide to go zero RB. He decided to go wide receiver RB. So he takes Michael Thomas, who is somebody who he has loved since the guy showed up in the NFL. He was raving about him since they won. So he ends up getting his guy there. And then he takes risky guy, with Gurley and his arthritis, Melvin Gordon holding out. David Montgomery might not end up being the guy, or might not have as big a load as everybody thinks he is because of Cohen and other people who are in Chicago. Austin Eckler, you can't have Gordon and Eckler be good. I think that was not realistic to work out long term like it did last year. Josh Gordon, marijuana joke. Vance McDonald is somebody who I think you took super dumb early. That was like a 13th round pick that you took there. That was ridiculous to me. Duke Johnson, very risky, but a very high ceiling on him, as do all of your players. And then you end up taking Justin Tucker in the 11th round just to spite me, thus causing Tyler to panic and take Greg Zuerlein in the 12th. So good job, you guys. You got me, I guess. So yeah, I think you did. I think you did fine. Whatever. Finally, we have Tyler's Ghost, who took DJ and Joe Mixon, two guys who have a lot of talent, but on very scary offenses. Same thing with Josh Jacobs. A lot of talent, very scary. And then if you look at your wide receivers, you could say a lot of the same things. Stephon Diggs, a lot of talent, but where the pass is going to go. Minnesota last year really liked going to Thielen. Now they might go to him. Who knows? Robbie Anderson, if that offense doesn't end up being very good, he could just end up falling off and not being anything. AJ Green, injuries, at his age are going to start piling up. Is he going to be the same guy he was? Sammy Watkins, his deal. Sterling Shepard, I don't think he's playing the first few weeks of the season. I mean, you have a lot of dice rolls on there, and it's not as pretty looking as Malcolm's team, which has more dice rolls, and because your guys don't have as high of an upside. So I'm not entirely sure I like your team as much as Malcolm's, even though they are very much the same form. So because my voice is starting to die, I'm going to move on to my favorite team, which is Junior Blow. I think Dave absolutely destroyed it. I have Lamar Jackson as a top 7 quarterback this season. I think he's going to just run all over people. I think he's going to be absolutely fantastic. He's going to end up putting up just bonkers numbers of points. He's going to be running stuff in. He's going to be throwing stuff in. He's going to be just doing absolute crazy, crazy stuff. And I'm just excited to see him play. And he's going to destroy the first few teams he has. I think he plays like Miami, the Cardinals, and Tampa Bay or something. I don't think he can't do it like that. But basically, he has like just garbage teams to start the season, so I think it's going to be absolutely fantastic. Tyler Boyd, the rest of his receiving core with like Tyrell Williams and Marquise Brown and Christian Kirk and everything like that. I mean, if these guys hit, they're going to hit hard. Alshon Jeffrey too. So I think his wide receiver core is really good for somebody who went zero wide receiver. And then you have your running backs of Kamara and Freeman, and if I'm wrong about it, Derrick Henry. And then you have Royce Freeman as well, who could be very, very good. Carlos Hyde, if he ends up getting cut from Kansas City and then picked up by the Texans, my God, that could be an absolute steal there, where you got him. Because that guy's he could Oh my God! I just realized that Carlos Hyde and Duke Johnson on the same team again. That could be a lot of fun. Anyways, so I really like this team. I even think the defensive players are very good. You got Khalil Mack as a linebacker. Uh, he's going to get a lot of touches and on a lot of people. Keanu Neal is Keanu Neal. I think he's going to be fine. And Trey Flowers, if he can be that beast that we assume he's going to be in Detroit, I think he's going to be absolutely bonkers. This is a very good team. My least favorite team goes to Matt M's team. Father Christmas is what we're calling him this year, apparently. Um, Jimmy G looked very bad in his first preseason game. He looked okay in his second one. He's coming off of an injury. Who knows what he's going to be like? Yeah, he starts off the season in Tampa Bay, but is that going to give you some false hope early on? I'm not really entirely sure. I'm just a little bit worried about his production. You got your wide receivers with Diggs and Anderson, AJ Green, Samuel Watkins. Like we've gone over this before. They're all of just giant question marks with decent upside, but not super high upside. Um, I mean, Robbie Anderson could be great. Stephon Diggs could be great. But again, I think just being maybe stuck on the corner there made you panic a little bit and take people at a bit of a reach. And I think it shows. Even in your running backs, Arizona and Cincinnati and Oakland, not exactly known for being great for running backs. So I think it's going to be a little bit tough to see how that ends up working out for you. I mean, it's going to be a tough season for you off the start. I'm sure that if some of these people hit, you're going to be excited. You're going to be doing really great. But if they don't hit, or if you pick the wrong guys to hit early on, you could be in a lot of trouble, and that's not going to be great for you. And then my spookiest team goes to the guy who drafted next to you, because I want to just talk about this. I just want to highlight Milk's team again. I mean, he ended up taking Josh Allen in the last round, who, God, I have no idea what to think about that human as a quarterback. He could be great. He could be garbage. Who knows? You got Michael Thomas, who is the only stud that I have any ability to have confidence in on your team, besides, I guess, Justin Tucker, who I think you reached on, but that's just me, I guess. But yeah, I think just looking at your team, it's just a bunch of question marks. But unlike the previous team that I talked about, um, this team has a bunch of question marks that have a lot higher ceiling, and I think that's where you want to be at this point. You want to be with a team that you could look at and say, well, if half the people on my team hit at their height, then my team's going to be absolutely bonkers. So, and I think he also did a really good job of he took Eckler a little bit high to cover up on Jordan, or on Gordon rather. I don't know. I think he's just doing a really good job with his team in the draft. So, good job on that, Milk. So next week I'm not here. I'm going to be doing cool stuff elsewhere. So I will see everybody after week 1. So the first official power rankings might get released on Slack at some point. But if not, the post week 1 power rankings will be the first official power rankings of the season. So I'd like to thank everybody for coming back. It's been 55 minutes of me talking. I'm going to go drink some water or something, feed the dogs, and make my life not as much pain as it is right now. So thank you guys, and have a great night.